Visit our sponsor, Bonner & Partners, right now at cashcutoff.com. That's cashcutoff.com. Bill Bonner's research network predicted the fall of the Soviet Union, the rise of Muslim terrorism, the Japanese crash, and the financial meltdown of 2008. Now his firm Bonner & Partners has published a more dire warning. What happens in the event your ATM doesn't work, your credit card is denied? What if you can't sell your investments? Although this might sound implausible to some, it's a very real possibility. A run on cash. Think about it. How do you pay for goods and services if credit doesn't work? Who among you, your friends and family, actually have more than a few dollars in their pocket? Claim your full intelligence file right away. Get 4 research reports, plus the free book, Hormageddon, and a 12-month all-access pass to the Bill Bonner letter for just $49. It's risk-free for 60 days. Get the Great American Credit Collapse, the Crisis Money Guide, how to get your own homestead on the cheap, and much more. Click the link below right now to register at cashcutoff.com. Hey everybody. I'm Christopher Green, and you're tuning into AMTV, Alternative Media Television. It is Wednesday, and as I'm driving into the studio this morning, these massive military-style helicopters are taking off in the air park near where I'm pulling into work. And pretty amazing. In fact, I was able to pull up my cell phone at the tail end while they were taking off, and it was a big enough event that people were parked with their cars in mid-traffic taking images of these massive military industrial complex helicopters. I'm going to have our video editor zoom in, taking off in the middle of Scottsdale like they're just minding their own business and World War III hasn't begun. Just a pleasant reminder that we aren't safe and that at any moment something big, something calamitous could absolutely happen. The end of the bell curve, statistical model where something major happens that nobody predicts. And it's amazing that people just don't think that these things are possible. Which brings me to today's video, the Brexit, and why it will collapse the Eurozone regardless of what the vote is. You see, if the vote is Remain, the Eurozone will collapse because it's kind of like a married couple. They're having severe problems once a month, so they keep going to counseling, but they have the same problem again the next month, and the month after that, and the month after that, and it keeps getting worse. They're cheating on each other, they're bitching at each other, they're bickering, it's destroying the family, the kids are in jeopardy. It's not working. So even if the UK decides and the vote's rigged to stay, which I believe it will be rigged one way or another, it's still going to end very badly. It's still going to end in a collapse of the 28-member bloc countries that are a part of this failed experiment that has only lasted 20 years or something like that. If the vote is to leave, and again, that would be engineered as well, but let's just play the counterpoint. If the vote's to leave, that would actually be a good thing for the UK. It would be just like Switzerland depegging from the euro. Everything's gotten better in Switzerland since. It's a very wealthy country. There's been economic growth post the depegging. The currency's doing better. The economy's doing better. Unemployment's doing better. Everything's doing better. So that would be a good thing for the UK if they decided to leave and somehow it was swung that way. But that would only ensure the rest of the member countries would collapse in the Eurozone. You see, there's no good outcome in this case. It all results in collapse, whether or not it's a vote to stay, rigged, or it's a vote to leave, engineered. And what's really heinous about this is how the mainstream media and these politicians are using the tragic death and murder of Jo Cox, the MP who was shot and killed, as her husband says, for her political beliefs, are using that as a guilt trip so that the people of the UK vote to stay. You see how manipulative these assholes really are? These politicians, they'll use anything. And to be honest, the Jo Cox murder to me looked very, very conspiratorial when it happened because it plays perfectly into the hands of the stay political agenda. And it makes everyone else look fanatical. It makes you look like a fanatic if you want to leave. You're like, you know what, this isn't working, this relationship isn't working, you're an alcoholic and you beat me, referring to the Eurozone bloc, we don't want to stay. It makes the other person look like the fanatic, when in reality, it's the Eurozone that is the alcoholic and is the psychopath and that has problems and needs to go in and get some help. So it all ends badly. It's kind of funny. I was watching Peter Schiff last night, a video on CNBC. He was on Fast Money. I'll tune in occasionally. And he was basically telling them that it's going to be awful. It's going to be horrible.
They're just still little cubs. I mean, they haven't really matured into a full-blown bear yet. They have no idea just how bad it's going to be. Okay, so how bad is it going to be?
It's going to be awful. But, you know.
He says,
how much worse? Because since we saw you last, we got a jobs report that some people will say was terrible.
Do you guys remember the financial crisis of 2008? Did you think that was bad?
Yes.
Yeah, this is going to be worse.
It's going to be worse than 2008. And it might play out a little differently. It might not be a direct stock collapse because, of course, the whore that makes up the Federal Reserve and Janet Yellen and her policies with zero to negative interest rates are massaging the stock market because they don't want to collapse in the stock market necessarily, but it doesn't mean that our currency won't collapse. You know, if you've got $100 and all of a sudden you lose purchasing power because the dollar collapses 20, 30%, and you can't spend that money fast enough, that is the same thing as the stock market collapsing 50% or more, like we saw in 2008, if you're losing purchasing power. If the dollar's not even worth wiping your ass with and getting a big poo print on it. You know, that's what we're looking at, and that's what people don't understand. There was a guy there, I forget his name, he's kind of arguing and bitching with Peter Schiff about how the Federal Reserve has everything under control, and we haven't been able to refinance debt like this, you know, this easy at 0% in, you know, 20 years or whatever, and that, you know, you're defying, Peter, every major central bank policy around the world. Well, he's like, yeah, it's because every central bank around the world is getting it wrong. Because they have no other option, and that's the point.
All I've heard from you for the last 5 years or 6 years is that the market's going to hell in a handbasket, and that the dollar is going to hell, and that treasuries are going to 6 or 7% yields. And in fact, really almost the opposite has happened. So, you know, I'm curious, one, how you're positioned now, and ultimately what you've been doing over the last couple of years to counter treasury yields that have fallen a couple hundred basis points. A dollar that's really, you know, it's my, you know, as we say, our dollar, your problem. The dollar does what it wants to do, and the dollar, until proven otherwise, is the global reserve standard.
Yeah, well, first of all, I haven't been saying stay out of the stock market. I've been saying stay out of the dollar. I've been saying buy foreign stocks. And that trade worked until about 2014. That's when the dollar started to rally. And the dollar only started to rally because everybody believed that the Fed's program actually worked, that we had a real sustainable recovery. The Fed could actually normalize policy, raise interest rates, shrink its balance sheet, and everything was going to be fine. That's why the dollar started to rally. So it's only been a couple of years. But now people are just beginning to realize that that wasn't true, that the policy didn't work. In fact, it not only didn't work, it made everything worse. We've dug ourselves into a deeper hole. People are going to find that out now when the Fed can't raise rates, when they have to go back to zero, and when they have to do QE4. And so I think the dollar is going to implode.
I've been saying the same thing for years now. The Federal Reserve can't raise interest rates. They can't do it. It's exactly why rates won't go up. You see, they've raised 25 basis points, but the real rates have actually declined since then through inflation. Notice how everything is getting more expensive around you. Notice how housing is recovered. Notice how rents are sky high, depending on what city you live in. Notice how food prices have gone up quite a bit. Your cost of living, everything that you need to consume, to eat, for housing, for lifestyle expenses, has gone up because of central bank policies. And they're all getting it wrong. And it's sparking and spurning inflation. So again, that's much more of a silent tax that the idiots that make up the masses in America, and I'm not referring to you, obviously I'm preaching to the choir here, but make up the general population of zombies and drones, they don't understand that. They don't get the purchasing power of money. They don't understand that if the dollar collapses and it loses half of its value, that $100 bill no longer buys what it used to buy. And that's a frigging problem. It becomes a Weimar Republic. You start to see hyperinflation. It becomes Zimbabwe or Venezuela, where you're bartering diapers for food. But people think this shit can't happen. Just like today, as I'm driving into the studio, we see these massive helicopters with their propellers taking off as they're probably running some kind of drill or something. People just don't think it can happen because it's been a while. It's been a while since World War II. It's been a while since the Great Depression. We had such a massive yo-yo from the 2008-2009 collapse. It was a blip. It went like this. People just have already forgot it. They're spending frivolously, taking out credit, you know, on their credit cards, car loans, homes. It's like we're just back to experiencing this roaring 20s environment, which is going to have a massive hangover. You probably remember this, the flappers, you know, your grandma maybe was one of those, you know, everything was great in the roaring 20s, the Great Gatsby, all that crap. You know, drinking and having a huge party. Well, guess what? There was a massive hangover that resulted in World War II and millions of people dead and an economic collapse. And I remember my late grandma, you know, pinching pennies to the day she died, and she lived almost to 100, well into her 90s, because she remembered how bad things got. But we have short-term memory loss here in the United States. Everything's a gravy train. People really do believe, as this guy on CNBC was arguing with Peter Schiff, that the Federal Reserve can just keep policy at zero, never normalize, and there's never going to be any consequences. Honestly, you're dumb. If you think that there will not be a reversion to the mean, you're dumb. If you think that there will never be another recession and/or depression, you're dumb. If you don't think that there will never be another world war, you're dumb. You know, the smartest people out there, a lot smarter than me, believe all these things are coming. In fact, the smartest people on the planet with the highest IQs actually have a very pessimistic view of the future. They're actually trying to get off the planet. They don't know if America, yet alone the civilization at large and the global population, can survive the next decade. That's a legitimate concern. You know, we see the advent of robotics and artificial intelligence and these things. I was even reading that the Eurozone and the EU wants to give rights to robots. I'm not even bullshitting you. It's the absolute truth. We'll put it up on the screen here. Want to give rights. That's like the movie that, what did his face make? I'm trying to think of who it was, the famous comedian where he plays a robot, and then he takes it to the Supreme Court so that he has rights because he's merged as kind of a human being at that point. It's escaping me, but I'll put it on the screen. Maybe one of you know, so put it in the comment box. We'll get it up there. But I mean, this is like science fiction stuff that is actually becoming a part of our reality. But my overall point with this video is no matter what happens with this engineered crisis, the Eurozone specifically, whether or not there's a vote to stay or leave, it all ends in collapse. Again, this is like a bad, violent, alcoholic marriage. And again, the problems are only compounding. The Eurozone wants to double down on these problems, and they're going to use the stay or leave vote, whichever way it's rigged, engineered, or swings, to argue for even more overarching power, more Orwellian control. This 1984 surveillance state where there are no borders and there is no sovereignty of nations because it's the agenda. This is the agenda of George Soros, who I think, by the way, is bluffing. He's made comments that we could have a Black Friday as soon as this Friday. I think he's bluffing. That's my first instinct. But who knows? I can play devil's advocate and say that they actually allow the UK to leave, and that might be part of the agenda as well. But the goal, the overarching goal, is further integration and further control. Unilateral power of the central government, whether or not we're looking here in the United States of America or we're looking at Europe and the Eurozone at large. It's all about the centralization of power, the destruction of our rights, the Constitution here in the United States of America, the rights of Europeans, and the giving up of all power, all liberty, and all freedom to these people. That's not what our founding fathers intended. That's not what any free state or country intended. I'm Christopher Green. Get this video out everywhere, make it viral, hard hitting it in your face, and click the link below to support our sponsor.